Hello and welcome to Sri Lanka 99.94 Cricket Every Day. My name's Mark Machado from the Murali End, and I'm joined as always by Estelle Vasudevan from the Papare. And today we're days away from beginning off the T20 World Cup in Australia. We're talking about how Sri Lanka should approach their warm-up matches against Zimbabwe and Ireland. Estelle, thank you for joining me. Are you as excited as I am about this tournament starting in a few days' time?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly after seeing how Sri Lanka have done in the last couple of months, that Asia Cup win, I think, has really kind of sparked a lot of interest around the country on what's going to happen. It's not going to be easy, but really excited about the T20 World Cup.
I'm so excited about it, and being a Sri Lanka fan living in the UK, I'm so happy I'm going to get to sacrifice sleeping to watch large chunks of this tournament, as it's about as far away as it can possibly be from me in terms of time zones. But let's forget about that. The squad has landed in Australia. We're recording this on Monday, the 3rd of October, and I saw some Instagram videos of some of the boys in St Kilda at some cafe and enjoying some soft drinks and some lunch or whatever. They start their playing cricket in Melbourne at the MCG on the 10th. So that's a week before we record it. Their first game is against Zimbabwe. Then 3 days later, they're back at the MCG playing against Ireland. They've two teams that they're not the most developed in terms of cricketing pedigree, but I think they're two very competitive teams, and I also think they're probably better than the teams that Sri Lanka will have to face in the first group, in the kind of pre-group qualifying stage that they've got to get through as well. And I'm quite excited about these games because I think it gives Sri Lanka an opportunity to try things out. We know the squad that are going to be there. I think the squad kind of, in most positions it picks itself. I just think there's a few question marks. So, this episode really, Estelle, we're trying to talk about what Sri Lanka might look to or might want to have a look at in those two warm-up games, right?
Yeah, like you said, there are many of the positions in the playing 11 are more or less decided, but I think there are a few areas where Sri Lanka can kind of test things out a little bit, particularly because you don't know what's going to happen in the tournament in terms of even fitness. You don't know if you're going to have, I really hope that doesn't happen, but you don't know if you're going to have an injury or two or kind of a niggle, which you'll have to deal with for a couple of games. So it's good to have all your 15 kind of in the mix of things in those first two warm-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we talk about... Look, actually, I was going to talk about who the 11 should be. But before we do that, let's talk about these two games, right? Because they are warm-up games before the actual qualifying for the main group starts. So, in theory, Sri Lanka could, I'm assuming, and this is a massive assumption here, but I'm going to go with it, that Sri Lanka get through the group that involves Namibia, the UAE and the Netherlands and make it through to the next stage after that. They don't even have to win the group. They just have to come second in a group of four, which you'd assume Sri Lanka should be able to do. So what role should these two games have, and what emphasis do we put on the results? Are we looking for them to go and play Zimbabwe and Ireland and win massively convincingly, or would it actually be better in some ways if the games are quite close?
Yeah, I think they'll be looking at kind of defining some of the roles in that side. We did see, even in the Asia Cup victory, issues with the middle order, especially number 3 and number 4, where you have Asalanka, Dhananjay Silva, Danushka Gunatilaka kind of vying for those two spots. So I think that's one area they'd definitely like to test out. And we spoke about it offline as well, about the press con before the team left, where Shanaka, I believe, mentioned that Asalanka looks in good touch. And I think that was the case even during the Asia Cup, where he was kind of striking the ball well in the nets, but just couldn't get going at all in the games. Um, so that's definitely an area they'd want to look at. Another one is Chamira and Lahiru Kumara. Uh, Obviously, they've been taken to Australia kind of with their fitness iffy. Kumara hasn't played international cricket since March. Chamira has played, and I think kind of they want to keep him kind of safe. They want to keep him, uh, protect him to a great degree so that he can play the main tournament. So it'd be interesting to see whether both of them are given a go, particularly because they haven't played any international cricket in the last couple of months. So Sri Lanka didn't play any internationals between the Asia Cup and the World Cup. So they've had kind of 3 weeks off internationals. So do they want to, slot someone like Chamira in and get him going, or do they want to keep him safe and not risk him, injuring himself? Those will kind of, in my opinion, those are the two areas that kind of want to have a look at in the warm ups.
Let's talk about Asalanka first, because for me, he's an outstanding talent. I think from watching him bat that his best format will probably be longer formats. He's not played a huge amount of Test cricket. That's a different conversation for a different episode. But I was really surprised when they ended up dropping him in the Asia Cup. I love Danjaya De Silva. He's probably one of my favourite members of the squad. But I thought Asalanka was probably one of about 4 or 5 players who I thought was essentially undroppable. They dropped him for all the right reasons. He was out of form. Dustin Sharnaker, in pretty much the first press conference after the Asia Cup is over, comes out and defends him and says, he's back in form. Do we read into that press conference and go, he's definitely starting the first proper game that they have, and that he's got to use these two games to kind of, I say, win over? I think most Sri Lanka fans have the same opinion about Asalanka as I do. That we see him as as a great hope, and we see him as potentially a future captain down the line as well. Or do they? What essentially the choice is: do you drop him straight away, or do you kind of hold off a little bit and put him in against Namibia and let him kind of go into it kind of without those 2 fixtures? It's interesting because the squad's kind of so small. There's not really any extra batters apart. The choice is essentially Asalanka, Danjaya Silva, or Danushka, 3 into 2, right? So do they need to play around with that? Or do you just go with, right, we think Asalanka's going to be our starting 3, just go with it from the get-go, right?
I think all 3 are definitely going to play the warm-ups. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there might be some flexibility with the number of people who can have a bet in those warm-up games. So all of them are likely to get a go. I actually think, okay, so we spoke about Danjaya De Silva previously as well. He just makes himself so difficult to leave out with his bowling, right? Because like we've said before, you can't really call him a part-time bowler anymore. He's a guy who can give you a couple of overs in the power play, who can give you a couple of overs in those middle over periods. So that's I think the biggest kind of challenge for the selectors as well, because his batting, I wouldn't say is ideal for T20 cricket, and I don't think anybody would dispute that, because he's more of a classical player. He's so good in the longest format of the game. And in contrast, Asalanka is such an impact player, right? And we did see that in the last competition as well, last T20 World Cup, where he didn't get 50s in every game, but those boundaries and the kind of momentum he was able to bring to the Sri Lankan batting performance in the power play in particular really helped them kind of get to those good totals throughout the tournament. Even in the games that Sri Lanka lost, that kind of impact he was able to make. I remember against Australia, where he came in I think the 3rd or the 4th over, and just belted Pat Cummins for a couple of boundaries to the square boundary. So kind of when Sri Lanka have the tendency or used to have the tendency to get a bit timid when they lose a couple of wickets in that power play, he's kind of the guy who can spark something different, right? He's the one who will give you that momentum. He can win you a game with that kind of performance. So I think that is kind of the thing that Sri Lanka cricket have to weigh up. Like Dhananjaya De Silva is definitely going to give you at least 3 overs with the ball. But can he match Asalanka in terms of impact with the bat? In a low scoring game and in tracks like we get in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, in the subcontinent, I think Dhananjaya De Silva is pretty much undroppable right now with Asalanka and Gunathilaka not really showing too much form. But you have to take into consideration the kind of pitches you're likely to get in Australia. You're likely to get really batting friendly wickets, right? So I'm wondering kind of what the thinking would be, whether they might even just leave out Danushka and play both Asalanka and De Silva.
Do you really need 3 spinners in Australia?
Yeah,
I mean, if you go
yeah.
with Hasaranga, and I'm assuming Tikshana's not dropped as well,
Yeah,
and maybe they might
that's
end
not
up
gonna
dropping
happen,
him.
yeah.
Do you need DDS as well? Do you need his overs? I mean, having 12 overs of spin available to you
Yeah.
in Geelong, is that what we need? I don't know. Like, I'm
Yeah,
guessing
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I'm guessing not.
Come on, they're not going to drop Mahesh Tikshana, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not-
exactly right. I
No.
don't think that's going to happen. I think he's too
Yeah,
smart a
so,
bowler
yeah.
to drop.
So yeah, but again, like it's you don't need that extra option, but it's so tempting because he's bowled that well, right? So yeah, I wonder if they might go for maybe leave Gunathilaka out and play both De Silva and Asalaka, but I think that decision will be made depending on how the trio go in those warm-ups. I really think it's going to come up to that last possible time where they're going to decide.
We're going to be back in a moment. We're going to talk about Kumara Chamira and the seam attack because there's some fitness questions over that. But before that, here's a short break.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Estelle, we touched on it earlier. Chamira and Kumara are coming into this tournament off the back of injuries, which is why they missed the Asia Cup. Madhushankar took his opportunity and cemented his place at the Asia Cup. Kumara and Chamira coming into this, though, off the back of very different 12 months. Chamira has gone around the world and he's made an impact in. I was going to say he's gone around the world. He hasn't actually. He's made a huge impact in the IPL, and he's really developed as a bowler. Lowry, on the other hand, has been injury riddled and hasn't played a huge amount of cricket for SL. He's played domestic cricket though. Are the two of them undroppable though? I think Chamira is pretty much undroppable. But what is going on with Kumara? What can we expect from him in this tournament?
That's another kind of a tricky kind of selection dilemma the management will have to make a decision on, because Kumara's pace is like, it's a different kind of pace to Chamira, right? Chamira is also hitting the high 140s or 150, but the way Kumara bowls, the ball always seems to kind of hit the bat a lot harder. So it would be really tempting to kind of have, I think that's why they picked him in the squad as well, despite him not having played international cricket since March, where he's a unique bowler to the Sri Lankan setup. And to have that kind of pace and that kind of aggressive intent going up against some of the smaller sides that we will face in that first round, I think is really important. Chamira is absolutely undroppable. If he's fit, he's playing, right? There's no way that they would leave him out unless they think that he's kind of still carrying a niggle and they want to keep him for the later round where Sri Lanka will be facing some of the tougher teams. But Kumara, I think it's going to be iffy because there's no way. How do we fit Madhushanka, Kumara, and Chamira in? And also Chamika Karunaratne, another guy who I think is pretty much undroppable at the moment. He has done enough with bat and ball over the last 12 months to basically be one of the first picks in that side. So you got Chamika Karunaratne and Dushmantha Chamira. Then I think you have to make a decision between, do you want the left arm option or do you want the quickest bowler in your side? Which is going to be tough, particularly after Madhushanka's performance in the Asia Cup, coming up against sides who will likely have a lot of right-handers in their top order. So another kind of a tough decision to make. It's a good position to be in. Sri Lanka rarely in those kind of situations where they've got two good options to pick from. So again, I think it'll depend on the two warm-up games, how they go. My gut feeling is that they'll stick with Dilshan Madhushanka.
So no place for Kamara unless he can prove out his fitness in the first two warm-up games. I just cast our minds back to almost this time last year when we get ready for the warm-up games in the UAE for last year's edition of the T20 World Cup. And we all went into it with very low expectations. And then the warm-up games, we did all right. And then in the qualifying round, we were superb. And then that game against Bangladesh, which I think was our first group stage, and it was like Kamara was the person who lit that match and stuck it onto the bonfire. And then after that, it seemed like we have exploded since. And I just love the energy, and I love what he brings to it. And I really hope he can find fitness again and come and throw some balls down like he can do to the best of his ability. I was going to swear there. That's how passionate I got about it. But I know that's not. I'm not sure that's allowed in the Kimberverse, so I won't. I will refrain. But I think it's such an. When you talk about like, I can't think of a time when you talked about Sri Lankan bowling when it was this exciting. If you know, and obviously we've had incredible bowling attacks in the past. But there's never been we might need to leave someone out situation, right? Unless
I have a wild suggestion for what we can do if we want to fit all of them in.
Go on, tell me your wild suggestion.
Okay, so basically number 3 and number 4 in the batting lineup have not gotten us any runs, right? In the Asia Cup at least, right? So why not? And this isn't going to happen, but why not push someone like Wanindu Hasaranga to bat at maybe 4. Yeah. Or if you want, you can push Bhanuka Rajapaksa up to 4 and bat Wanindu at 5.
Yeah.
And fit him in the top 6. Fit Wanindu Hasaranga in the top 6. And then you've got Chamika Karunaratne, who is, I think, more than capable to bat at number 7 in T20 cricket. And then you have your Chamira, you have Mahesh Theekshana, you have Dilshan Madhushanka, and you have Lahiru Kumar. That would be like brilliant to watch. I think all 3 of them or all 5 of them bowling would be incredible, I think.
I love that idea. I'd even go one step further and put Hasaranga to open with Mendes. I would. Like, why not? Like, let him hit it about. The only other issue with it, I basically agree with you. I think you could fit them all in. The only other issue is that gives you like 40 overs or something crazy to bowl, doesn't it? Like, it's like who's going to bowl when is the actual problem. But I love it because I think you basically have Kamara and Chamira to open up the bowling and potentially end the bowling, and then you just cram up the middle overs with all sorts of different weird stuff coming down the track. Never let a batsman settle. Estelle, basically, if this doesn't happen, or if we don't win the Asia Cup, I fully expect SLC to give you a call now, like, and bring you in as some sort of consultant, because I think this is pure genius. And it's the kind of
It's
thinking
all
outside the
wishful
box that
thinking,
we
right?
need. Well, no, I suspect, I don't think it's that far away. Like, because I do agree, right? You've got to think about how to get your best players on. This is why, I said earlier, I think there's a conversation had about whether or not Dick Sharner starts. If the pitches aren't going to turn, if they're not going to do anything, what's the point of having him on? And I adore him.
No. I
Like,
disagree with it. No. Mahesh Tekshana is no way, man. He's see, the world is sleeping on this guy. He gives you, like, he's not gone for more than, I don't think, more than 6 runs or more, conceded more than 30 runs in the last however many T20s he's played. That's incredible, right? Bowling in the power play and sometimes bowling beyond the 15th over. No, I'm not.
Estelle, the man's got like an IPL contract. He's got contracts in every franchise league going. I don't think anyone's sleeping on him. But what I'm saying though is if he's not going to get much out of the pitch, and I do also agree, I think he's an incredibly smart cricketer. I think, like, if he comes on and goes, right, this is what the pitch is doing, but by the third or fourth ball into his spell, he would have worked out what he's going to do to either get a wicket or not go for runs. I kind of agree with that. But I'm also thinking there's got to be a situation where you look at a pitch and go, we've got a better seam bowler than we do have so many turns, because I'm assuming that we'll all go with Hasaranga is the one actual undroppable player that we've got, right? So you're always going to have those 4 overs of spin, and then if you needed to get another 4 overs out, you've got either DDS or you've even got Charath Hasaranga who can bowl. I mean, I think Sri Lanka have had a lot of part-time spinners, and maybe, hopefully, Charath Hasaranga is the next in that line. I mean, he's not had his big breakout spinning moment, but I'm sure that's only round the corner. See what I did there? But so I do think, as I said earlier, I'm not sure you need to go to games in Australia with 12 overs of spin available, right? And maybe it is using up a place. Right, we're going to take a final break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask Estelle for what her tactical plans would be to get other teams to win the World Cup. No, I'm joking. I'm going to ask Estelle what the results need to be for this and how she sees qualifying going as well.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
So Estelle, I think we've kind of discussed all the various kind of iterations of this team that can happen. I look at this, we've been talking about this, and I know we mentioned this off air as well, which is why I bring it up actually. I'm really worried if anything happens to Bharnika Rajapaksa, who's going to play that role, right? Because we don't have that big hitter. I wonder if that's what Danushka's role in the side is almost. And that's why when we have that discussion about Charath Hasaranga and Dhananjaya De Silva, we kind of seem to keep him out of it a little bit because he's kind of the backup batsman now. And also he's a big hitter, but obviously his intent doesn't seem to translate to runs as often as it should be doing recently, right?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue with him because he's obviously talented, right? There's no one questioning how good Danushka Gunathilaka can be because he has all the potential, and to a great extent, I think he has not fulfilled it. He could have been one of Sri Lanka's best limited overs cricketers, I think. but he does have that ability to clear the boundary, which we don't see often from or clear the boundary consistently. And we've seen that in the LPL in fits and starts, but we haven't really seen it off late in international cricket. And I think getting him in the middle order is not the worst ploy, um, because obviously Sri Lanka management seems set on having Pathum Nisanka opening alongside Kusal Mendes. So kind of fitting him in that middle order is a good option because, like you said, there aren't that many players there's no one like Bhanuka Rajapaksha, right? There's nobody in the Sri Lankan setup who can hit the ball like Bhanuka Rajapaksha. And I think Danushka Gunatilaka is maybe one of the guys who can come closest to that. So you're right. I think he's kind of there for that, to kind of push things along in that middle order, and that's why it's always a toss up between Asalanka and De Silva, and Gunatilaka is maybe kind of confirmed in that number 4 position, but he's going to have to make some runs because we've seen this before, right? You can have all the ability in the world, but if that's not translating to runs, and you don't offer an option with the ball either, then that's a big concern for the management. I hope he gets going because in full flow, he's an incredible striker off the ball. He can clear the boundary easily. He finds the gaps. He's also very he's a guy who you can enjoy watching as well. So I hope he gets some runs, but I don't think he's kind of in a position now to kind of say his position in the side is confirmed. He could very well lose out to one of De Silva or Asalanka.
It's some of the Sri Lankan batsmen, and this is definitely a problem for the men's side more than we've talked about the women's side. Sorry, I'll just rephrase that. Some of the Sri Lankan batters, their problem isn't being able to score runs; it's being able to score them quickly, right? And Danushka and Bhanuka are the only two that can really hit boundaries from the get-go. I mean, like Darshan Chanaka and Charmaka can as well, but their roles are much more defined further down the order. It's just like sometimes the issue why they didn't get over the line in the few of the games that they've lost means that they score too slowly early on, right? So, and I think that's why if you actually talk about if you wanted to talk about the openers, and I don't think anyone's advocating moving Kusal Mendes and Pathum Nisanka at the moment, but the one criticism would be is they just need to get off the mark quicker because they might be around 180 on a strike rate of 180 by the time they're kind of 30 or 40 balls in, but their first 10 balls they score very slowly off, right? And that's what gives fans the slight jitters. But what I will add to on top of all that is there's many different ways to win cricket games, and we don't need to win it by going all out turbo from the get-go, and maybe relaxing into it slightly is the method that's going to work for us.
But I think if I can butt in, during the Asia Cup, I think we saw a big improvement on that, where they were looking for, particularly Kusal Mendes, I think, was given that kind of role where he needs to get the momentum for the side. He needs to get those boundaries every over. And Nisanka was a little more sedate, but much better than what we've seen in the past, where you feel like he was also kind of carrying that top order in the recent past, where he was the only guy getting runs. So he felt similar to Atapattu, I guess, where she feels like she has to stay for as long as she can in the middle. But that kind of pressure seemed to have been released in the Asia Cup because he did go for his shots early on. So we've seen a kind of improvement in that area, definitely, because on paper, yeah, their strike rates are not great. I think the overall records are not great, but I think if you look at kind of you separate the time periods, definitely there's an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And also, there's two things that we have to consider. That during Sri Lanka's lockdown was super aggressive and they didn't get to play many games during that COVID time. And I think it took a lot of our players a little while to get back into playing competitive cricket, especially if you look back at that England tour, and a lot of those England players have played a huge amount of cricket in a kind of few weeks leading up to it. Sri Lanka hadn't really done that. But now that, you know, the amount of cricket that they're playing is on par with what everyone else is playing. And also, you have to remember, for somebody like Pathum Nissanka, who comes into the side playing domestic cricket, the gap between international cricket and domestic cricket is huge. And it's only going to be, you know, he's only almost just over a year into, he's about 18 months into having made his debut. It's only going to be once he's played 4 or 5 years of cricket that we're actually going to see of international cricket, that we're going to see what he's really capable of from this stage. If he's able to do what he's able to do now, which a lot of times has been to hold an innings together and score at a decent-ish pace, maybe not as quick as some people would have wanted, then you can only imagine what's down the track for this kid. He's going to be a phenomenal talent. Estelle, let's wrap this up. Before I go, can you give me your predictions of what the warm-up game results will be? Because I know we shouldn't look at warm-up game results, but we are all super competitive. Oh, just let us know. Are we going to win these 2 matches?
Yeah, I'm going to go with we're going to win. And I think it'll be important for the team as well to get those wins under their belts, because they want to continue that kind of momentum they've got.
Brilliant. I think they're going to win as well, because I'm a Sri Lanka fan, and that's what we do. Thanks for listening to Sri Lanka 99.94 Cricket Every Day. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell your friends and family about us. Download the 99.94 app and follow us personally. You can follow me on @Mark Machado on Twitter, and Estelle @Estelle_VasuDev1, as in the number 1. We put links for everything we do there on this podcast and beyond. Follow our network @99.94 DM on social media. Follow for podcasts and commentary from the bat and ball world. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation on 99.94 We Speak Cricket.